Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're getting a chance to sit down with Josh Presley, host of the Great Canadian BJJ Show and also the head trainer of Halifax BJJ. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast. If you like all our guest episodes, our awesome technique videos that are coming out, and so much more, make sure you like and subscribe and don't forget to share. We want to build that community up as much as we can. We're also sponsored by SpiritLeaf Waterdown, located at 64 Hamilton Street North in Waterdown, Ontario. If you're looking for Canada's top cannabis brand, look no further than SpiritLeaf Waterdown, and Alex and his crew are going to help you out with all the THC and CBD products that you need. Just remember to like our Instagram plus their Instagram, and you're going to get a discount every time you shop there. So remember, that's 64 Hamilton Street North in Waterdown, Ontario. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the mat, and don't forget to subscribe. Whenever you're ready, Mike.
Whenever you're putting a lot of pressure on me. Are we keeping all this in? Sure. We don't even know what we were talking about previously. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast, to the Choking Hazard podcast. Our guest this evening, or morning or afternoon, whenever you listen to it, is Mr. Josh Presley out in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Josh, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and just a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Like you said, my name is Josh Presley. I'm a black belt. I've spent the majority of my time training on the East Coast of Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia, like you mentioned. I actually live in Wellington, but it's probably 20 or 30 minutes outside the city. So I got my black belt from probably the most well-known gym.
Oh no, he's frozen.
And got my black belt. 2015 would have been when I got my black belt. So I would have started Jiu-Jitsu around 2007, I believe. I did quite a bit of competing in the IBJJF circuit at like blue and purple belts. I got over from the IBJJF Worlds. I got second to Michael Liera at blue belt in 2011. I got another bronze at purple belt in 2013. I got my black belt in 2015. Since then, I'm no longer a part of Titans anymore. I teach at a Halifax BJJ, and I also have my own gym, which is the logo you see behind me. So this is just in my garage, but I'm teaching at Halifax BJJ. And now I'd say I'm at the point in my career when I'm becoming more of a teacher than I am a competitor. Not to say that I'm done competing, because I still have a lot of good matches left in me, but I think I'm just kind of at that point now where I'm less of a competitor and more of a teacher. And I'm just trying to think, how can I kind of make my mark in the sport, and what's the best way to kind of get my teaching methods across. And that's kind of where I'm at in my career. Yeah. With Jiu-Jitsu. When did you actually start making that transition? Cause like, before, like when I was competing a lot, it's not like I necessarily like hated teaching or anything like that. Like I kind of told people like, hey, like I was kind of a competitor first, and then I was like a teacher second, like, hey, I'll help out. I'll show you guys some stuff kind of thing. But like, when did you feel like you started making that transition? Because I feel like I'm starting to make that transition as well, where I'm actually enjoying teaching a lot more than I am like going out there and competing myself, or watching, people that I'm helping get better go out and compete. Yeah, it's a good question. I would say I've always been a little bit of both. Like even when I was a blue belt, I mean, gyms were smaller at the time, so I was doing quite a bit of teaching. But I would say this was more kind of after I got my black belt, because I mean, I'm in Nova Scotia. As you guys know, when you're going to jiu-jitsu tournaments, you're just paying for it yourself. So, it's extra expensive for me to go out to Worlds or to do any IBJJF competition. So, I was really hungry for it when I was a blue belt and a purple belt, and I just didn't really care what hurdles that I had to jump over, or how I was going to get the money one way or another and go and compete. And, as life goes on, I'm married now, and, I'm older. It's tougher to get to these tournaments. So I would say once I got my black belt, already at brown belt, I wasn't competing as much as I did at blue and purple belts. But I'd say once I got my black belt, I still wanted to compete, but it just kind of started naturally happening where I was just teaching more classes. I was getting kind of more compliments, and people were like, oh, like I really enjoy the classes that you put on and stuff like that. And then the transition from Titans to Halifax BJJ, which is the gym that I'm a part of now, like we ended up with really large class sizes. And then I kind of went from being like a jiu-jitsu instructor that was cool with like teaching a small class. And some people really prefer that, to teach like kind of 3, 4, or 5 people. But I went from that to like all of a sudden I was kind of teaching 10, 15. Now I average like 18 to 20 students for the morning classes that I teach. So it's been kind of a slow progress, I guess, from like competitor to teacher, but it's something that I really enjoy now.
So you kind of mentioned like you got your audio kind of transitioned out for a second. So who did you get your black belt from again? Sorry.
Yeah, so I got my black belt from Kevin Taylor. Kevin Taylor is a black belt under Renzo Gracie. So Titans would be under the Renzo Gracie kind of umbrella or affiliate or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I did the majority of my training with them up until black belts. Kevin gave me my black belt in 2015. And then Halifax BJJ, that kind of origin story would have started around 2017, I believe, like towards the end of that year. So that's kind of where I've been ever since. And it's just awesome to see jiu-jitsu grow, like I'm sure you guys have from the time you would have started until now. But at the time, I was just Titans. It still is an MMA gym as well. And I didn't even think it would have been possible, especially around Nova Scotia, to have a gym that was just jiu-jitsu and nothing else. And Halifax BJJ has really done that and gone above and beyond with the amount of numbers and students that they have. So it's really awesome to see.
So obviously it's kind of like in the GTA, we have the collection of so many different schools, obviously because of the population. Have you kind of seen the type of growth, especially in the, like called the East Coast, let's call it that, a lot more schools, a lot more people getting involved in the sport at all?
Yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. Like, I haven't done a whole lot of training or competing in Ontario. I did the Abu Dhabi trials that was there in 2017, I think. It would have been a couple of years after I got my black belts. And yeah, I mean, like it seemed like every corner there was a jiu-jitsu gym, and it's not quite that big in Nova Scotia, but it really is pretty crazy in how, like, I mean, we're a pretty small province, but I could probably name just like 10 or 12 kind of gyms or affiliates just off the top of my head that are kind of throughout Nova Scotia. And in like small areas of the province, like there's a gym that's an affiliate of ours called Breakthrough Jiu-Jitsu, and they're out in Amherst, and it's much, much smaller than Halifax. Like they're kind of, they're very close to the New Brunswick border. So it's not a big town at all, but the gym there, Breakthrough, they just basically doubled in size. They had to move to a bigger location, and it's just jiu-jitsu, man. Like you guys train, you know what it's like. It's like when that kind of thing spreads and you get more people doing it and they're bringing their friends in. It's just a really cool organic thing that doesn't happen with a lot of other like sports and activities. I think some sports get kind of pushed on, especially kids, kind of too much and too hard and too soon, but it's cool to see a jiu-jitsu gym and a room develop and go from like start out kind of small, and you see just people become like naturally attracted to it and it start to grow. So yeah, when I would have started, there was probably like maybe 3 to 4 gyms in the province. And I would say now, like we're easily like 10 to 15 gyms, if not more.
Nice. So like, you know, with the last year and a half, I know with COVID, there's been a lot of challenges and difficulties. We've talked about it like in the GTA, but like, what has that been like with, you know, with you and running a gym, and like, what are some things that have been happening like in Nova Scotia for people that are listening to us in Ontario or elsewhere? Like, what are some things that have been, you know, going on with that up until now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's something that I always ask on my own podcast, kind of what everybody's COVID story has been. And I think for Nova Scotia, it hasn't been quite as bad as probably it was in where you're at. You're outside Toronto, I believe, or anywhere in Ontario, because things seem to happen a little bit slower here, no matter in terms of COVID or technology or what have you. But so, yeah, we were shut down. I remember March 2020. The gym was shutting down, and I'm just the type of person that like I'm gonna find a way to train, like as long as it's possible. Like I'm gonna be able to do it, just because it's such a big part of my life, and it has been for so long. So basically, like once we realized like, okay, the gym's actually, we're not even gonna be able to physically open the gym. Like, what are we gonna do? So it was me and another blue belt at the time. We just got a couple mats off of Amazon, and we were rolling in his basement, just really like, you know, lo-fi kind of stuff, but we were still doing it every day, and we were kind of still able to, you know, do a little bit of roll and not go too crazy or anything, because there's a couch or a TV in the way. But so we were doing that for a few months. And then, you know, we kind of slowly upgraded the setup. There was a shed that we were rolling in, and that was so we went from the basement to the shed, had a little bit more space. And really the COVID times was a big motivator for me for opening up this space, because I just got to a point where I just, you know, like, so we were shut down for like 3 months. We were doing this basement training. We were training in the shed. okay, then we're allowed to come back to the gym. And we were allowed to come back in small bubbles. So basically I was given a bubble of like 10 people for the morning. And they were like, okay, you can't train outside your bubble. You guys train from 6 to 7 and you got these 4 time slots a week. And like, that's it. Right. So it's like, okay, if that's what it is, that's what it is. So that's what we were doing for a few weeks. Then we got shut down again. So it was like, no more training at all. So this happened 2 or 3 times. So I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to, like, I want to be able to train and I don't want it to be dictated by whatever rules are going on, you know, in society. I'm not getting into like the whole COVID thing, you know, it's a thing to me, you know, I don't, you know, the science behind it or whatever is its own thing, but I want to be able to do jiu-jitsu, like regardless of what's going on in the world. So I wanted to kind of get this thing going for myself. So I basically, we had moved, me and my wife, and we went from a place where we didn't have any type of garage to a double garage. So basically, as soon as we moved in, I was like, all right, well, I got to throw the mats down and get my setup going.
So building a gym.
Exactly, yeah. And then luckily, my dad is quite handy. So we went the extra mile and we put in a whole a subfloor with like foam blocks and then this plywood top and then put the mats over top of it. So it's really quite nice. And yeah, so I've been just, you know, running some privates and some small classes out here. So, you know, I was just worried that I wasn't going to be able to train again because it was like, you know, what if we get shut down for 6 months or 8 months? It's like, you know, I don't want to have to go back to rolling in the basement and just having one blue belt to beat up. I want to have some training partners, right? So
I think your stories are very similar to mine. He's actually a purple belt now, but I did find a blue belt who listens to this podcast. Shout out to him. I'm going to keep him nameless. That I continually just beat on but it was beneficial because like, you know, he was helping me train. I actually, you know, picked up some ideas and things from him, and I'm sure I helped him out in the beatings as well. So shout out to that unnamed person. You know who you are, who listens to this.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm the type of person that I'll always find the best in whatever type of, especially bad situation that I'm in. So during like the real bad COVID times when it was just basically like I'm training once a day and I'm getting 3 rolls in the basement, I still like took that time to like watch a lot of footage, catch up on like sharpen up on some instructional material, watch some competition footage. I started doing my own podcast to try to connect with people and stuff that way. So I tried to be productive with the time. I just didn't want to be like, well, shit, I can't train. Like life sucks, you know, life sucks, but you can still train and try to get something out of it. So
that's basically what Aaron was doing. The whole, this sucks. This is stupid.
I didn't have anybody to train with. That was my issue, right? So like,
you don't have any friends.
Well, no, it took me a while to get like, you know, let's call it permission if you want from my wife, but it was like
his manager. He had to talk to
my manager, and you know, it was basically finally able to get some training in. But it was like anything, I didn't have anything to do, so it was like watching footage, and it was like, okay, and that's where the whole sprung the idea of a podcast up too, right? So like that's Mike and I had talked about doing a podcast for like months and years, and we're like, okay, we have no excuse now, like let's just do it. And that's kind of like what I wanted to ask you, like how did you kind of like get into that whole transition of even like starting up your podcast? Because for everybody listening right now, like you're the host of the Great Canadian BJJ podcast show. So like how'd that happen?
Yeah, so I would say it's probably pretty similar to how you guys kind of started. I wouldn't say it was always a dream of mine or anything. But I definitely noticed it just kind of becoming more popular and stuff like that. And I'm the type of person where if I do something, like I don't want it to be half-assed. Like I want to do it. Like I didn't want to like have an idea for a podcast and do one episode and then that just totally be it, right? Because I know there's lots of people that do that. So yeah, it was pretty much just out of COVID boredom where I wanted to talk to some people about jiu-jitsu, and, you know, like can remember saying to my wife before, like, I just wish I had someone to talk about jiu-jitsu with, like, where it's just us watching Seinfeld or whatever.
You're no fun. I need to find somebody to talk jiu-jitsu with.
Oh, and I find for myself, I mean, I'm pretty introverted personality wise, you know, like I'm pretty quiet guy. So I feel like it's me kind of getting out of my comfort zone, reaching out to people that maybe I'm already friends with and I haven't talked to in, you know, some time. So it's a good way to kind of chat. And I think it's just a good way just to kind of spread the message about jiu-jitsu. Because I don't think like my goal for this podcast isn't to be like rich and have 1 million people listen to me, blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean, if that happens, cool. But I think for me, it's like, there's people that pay attention to me and listen to me, and, I'm a black belt. So I think I have some good experiences to share. And I think to me, if you can just kind of spread that message to even just a couple people, or even just like one person, like as kind of lame as it sounds, if you can kind of make a difference for one person, I think it's worth it. And I know like the people that I've chatted with have kind of like opened up, which is kind of cool, and like shared stories that I either haven't heard before, or I know that would make a difference for me or motivate somebody else. So, I think just making a difference like on a small scale is kind of just what I'm trying to do, and just kind of spread the word of jiu-jitsu and tell people what it's about.
Yeah, that's that's basically, we have a similar origin story of our podcast as well. What is actually some advice to somebody you would give to somebody who either wants to open up a gym, or like, hey, they want to start a podcast? Because I'll be openly honest, I kind of probably share the same view as you. If you want to start a podcast, don't expect to make a lot of money. Because I'll be honest, the check is still in the mail. Like, Aaron, like, where's our money?
Still in the mail. It's still costing us money.
Still costing us.
Yeah, no, I think I've made about as much as you guys by the sounds of it. But but I would say my advice really like is just do it. Like, don't overthink it. Like, if you want to do, especially the podcast, because it's just very low barriers to entry. Like, I just do my podcast on Anchor, and it's just audio only. Like, I'm too lazy to even want to do the video. But especially if you're wanting to do a podcast, and even just opening a gym too, like just do it. Like, I think that's the best thing that you can do. Like, cause you're just getting jiu-jitsu out there to that many more people. Like, I'm not saying if you're a white belt and you've just done 2 classes, go open a gym. That's not what I'm saying. But if you feel like you have a good handle on jiu-jitsu, and maybe you're like, even like purple belts, like I said, I was teaching as a blue belt, and it was just because, gyms were small. My instructor would go away. It'd be like, I was either the highest ranked or like the best person to do it. So they just got me to do it. But yeah, I think like the more jiu-jitsu gyms, the better. And, kind of the cream will always rise to the top in terms of like who has the best competitors and who's the best instructors. But I think a lot of time can be wasted due to like doing nothing. Right. So I think if you do, if that really is your goal, and you really have to really be about it, and you have to love it. And I think a lot of us, if anyone that's watching this is definitely loves jiu-jitsu. So I think if that's a goal of yours,
all 12 of our listeners.
I think if it's a goal, you just gotta do it, and just, don't care what anybody else thinks, and don't get caught up in like the amount of listeners or the amount of views. Just do it because you enjoy it.
Did you hear that, Aaron? Let's do this because we enjoy it. Okay.
Hey man, we're up on episode 75. We're going a lot longer than my wife ever thought we would. So we're making progress.
I'm sure you guys have had, I have listened to some of your episodes before, and just kind of skimmed through, just listen to people that I've known. And it's a great way to discover new people too. But I'm sure you've discovered new people just interviewing them on this show. Like, I got to talk to like Hanette Stack. And to me, that was a cool one because she had won ADCC before. And I was just kind of looking at like people who had won ADCC. And I was like, I feel like if anyone is going to message me back, it'll probably be one of the ladies that won. They seem to be a little nicer than some of the guys that won, a little less ego. So I just messaged her on Instagram, and she messaged me back, and it was, it took a while, took a month or two to kind of nail down a time, but that one was super cool to me. And that's not like a super popular episode that I did, but to me, it was really cool because I got to talk to someone who was like as equally, if not more passionate about jiu-jitsu as me. And, I got to hear some of her story. To me, it was really interesting. I talked to a couple other people that found it cool. So like, to me, that's good enough for me.
No, exactly. Like, we've met so many different like academy owners, or like people that we've known, and like gotten to have like good in-depth conversations, especially about, their personal struggles, or like, how they found their passion, or like even just things that they've been working on in between, like between COVID and between now, and like what their goals are moving forward. So we've had a lot of great guests, and like, again, we're planning on having a lot more guests throughout this future. So I think it's one of the greatest things that we ever did, kind of starting it off, and it's slowly grown into what it is now. And we don't plan on stopping anytime soon, and just keep going with it. Right. And it's like you said, like, you find something you drive with, just keep going. Nobody's going to tell you to stop. So just keep going.
Except me. Aaron, you need to stop. Seriously.
Well, if you got to stop, you got to stop. I get it.
You only need one post, bro. But no, man, I agree. And I love it. I love seeing more podcasts pop up, and, like, it's just wicked. So yeah, no, I like what you guys are doing. I think one of the ones that I listened to that you guys did, I don't even know how recent it was, but Alison Tremblay. I interviewed her.
It was like one of our very first ones too.
It was like last year, probably.
Okay. So
yeah, last year.
Because I scheduled an interview with her, and then I was looking up like other interviews that she did, and I was like, oh, cool, these guys interviewed her. So then I watched that one just to so I had an idea of like some stories that she'd already told, so stuff that I kind of wanted to drill down deeper on or avoid or whatever. So that was a cool one that I had listened to, and I like how you guys were getting some of like the real like OGs in Ontario. That was some interesting stories to hear, and I kind of want to do that with my podcast too. It's cool how like jiu-jitsu kind of got its start in each city and province, to me anyway.
Trying to find the godfathers of jiu-jitsu. Was Aaron, was that one of the podcasts where me and you just had like an on-air fight for like 5 minutes? Or did you just edit that?
I think you and I just kept going at it. Or was that one, or there's another one? But like Allison just kind of sat there for like 5 minutes, and while Mike and I just argued with each other over something. She's just kind of giggling. These are things that sometimes maybe Aaron edits out or not. I try to tell Aaron not to take himself too seriously, but this is the end result of what happens. Unfortunately, I want to actually transition a bit. So we talked about jiu-jitsu, we talked about the origin of your podcast. How did you actually get into jiu-jitsu originally? Because when you started back in like 2007, I'm guessing there wasn't like, oh, like there's this jiu-jitsu place down the street from where I live. In Halifax, like, hey, or in Nova Scotia, hey, I'm just gonna go to the local BJJ shop and start training. Like, how did you find jiu-jitsu there, and like how did you get started?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. So yeah, I was athletic as a kid. I played hockey and soccer when I was young, from 6 until 14, 15. And actually, when I was like a teenager, 13, 14, 15, I was actually quite overweight. And the heaviest I ever was at the time was probably 205, 210, which now I average like 160, 165. So I actually had started trying to lose weight just from like reading like men's health magazines and stuff at the time. I was like finding motivation in that. And I was into watching UFC because I was in high school at the time. So couple friends and me were into watching UFC, and at the time it was like Chuck Liddell was really popular, and GSP. And I remember watching one of Chuck Liddell's fights, and like for the weight, it had like he was 205, and I remember being like fuck, I weighed myself and I was like 206 or 207. Like, I don't think I should be in the same weight class as Chuck Liddell. Like, this guy just obscene. So then I was like, I think I had got to lose weight, so I just started like just trying to find different things around me to find motivation. And I was interested in doing some type of martial art, but at this point I was 16 years old and I didn't have any aspirations to be like a fighter or an MMA fighter. I just thought it'd be cool to, get into something and like try to work towards a black belt. This was my goal at the time when I was 16. And there was no Facebook or anything back then. Like what I was using back then was the yellow pages. So while I was at work, I would just look through the yellow pages and look through like, it was in like other sports and like martial arts. So there was like Aikido and tons of Taekwondo and tons of karate, but I didn't really want to do that because from what I was seeing in the UFC, it seemed like it was like, you got to have like striking and grappling was like the two main things. And I had seen one of the Ultimate Fighter finales, Diego Sanchez and Cara Parisian had a really highlight-worthy real fight. So I saw that. I was like, that was really cool. I was like, it'd be really cool to learn judo. Like you can throw someone on their head like that. Like that'd be badass. So that was what I was trying to get into. I was looking for somewhere to do judo, but there was nowhere around close enough to do it. The closest spot was Bridgewater, and that's like hours away from where I'm at. So I did somehow come across a couple of jiu-jitsu gyms. And at the time it was just Titans in Halifax and Fit Plus in Dartmouth, which is basically just like across the bridge. So they had a couple popular fighters at the time. So I basically just ended up going to Titans, and I went with a high school friend at the time and another guy that I worked with. So we kind of went to our first class, and it was just the classic, like the Rocky scene when you walk into the gym and everyone's hitting the heavy bags and stuff. Except for us, it was just you're waiting in the alley for someone to come unlock the door, and you're just hoping that there's actually a class. You don't really know like what's going on. So,
hi guys, do you have jiu-jitsu tonight?
Yeah, right. Like a 16-year-old kid. I don't know what's going on. Finally, someone shows up 20 minutes late. I'm off the door. And they run us through like kind of a basic beginner's class. And, you know, the first like couple classes, you're kind of getting into it. You don't really know what it's about or, you know, anything like that. But so I would say probably by a month, my other buddies had kind of dropped out. But by that time, I had already kind of made some friends in the class and I kind of felt like I was getting into it. So I would say after I got about a month in, I was starting to be like, okay, like I think I kind of want to do this and got a knack for it. And then from the time that I started was probably August 2007. Then I got a gi around Christmas time. Like up until then, I was just training twice a week. It was only no gi that we did. So I got a gi. I had to go to this weird store in somebody's house to buy a gi because there was just like where you could buy martial arts gis. So I went and did that. And then I was kind of just going to more regular classes. People were like, oh, you should come to like the Sunday open roll. Like we have a class then. So then I was like into it and really have been ever since. So yeah, it just kind of came from me kind of like being out of shape and kind of wanting to get in shape. And then once I kind of lost some weight, I was like, okay, now I want to do a martial art. And I discovered jiu-jitsu and I have really had to look back ever since. So like, that's how I got into it.
So kind of like, you know, through your evolution from like competitor to teacher now, and especially like getting into like instructionals, and there's just so much more available for students, right? Like when you kind of like look at instructional formatting and all that, like what do you kind of look for, especially like for a student, like what's a good format for them to learn off of? Is it more like
if I'm teaching?
Yeah, if you're teaching, or like if they're going to grab an instructional off of you, or if like you want to recommend one, like how would you kind of formulate the best way for a student to learn from?
Couple different ways you can look at that one. I'll start off with how I would teach it, and then I'll answer like what I would recommend in an instructional separately. How I would teach it and kind of how I've learned teaching over the years is that I really feel like less is more. Like I was definitely been in classes, you know, where the instructor shows 4, 5, 6 different techniques, and that can be a good class. But I think if you just think in terms of how people learn and how I learn and how most people learn is that, you know, like you get little bits of information and you take that and maybe you can work on it and add that to your game, and then you add a little bit more. No one's ever learned 6 moves in a class and remembered all of them and used them effectively. Like that's not how it's right. Like to me, I don't do warm-ups. Like that's a big part of my classes. I don't do the running in circle, shrimps and jumping jacks and all that stuff. Like, you know, I could go on about that for an hour, but it's bullshit.
Sorry, I just think it's funny from like a personal training strategy. It's like, don't fucking warm up. That shit's stupid. Okay, just throw some weight on the bench press. Don't be a pussy and just bench. Okay, but like in jiu-jitsu, I totally know what you're saying. It's like, okay, like front rolls and back rolls. Like for like a more advanced student, like you need to take your time and put it into the areas that are important, like, you know, drilling concepts, like things like that, versus I think by the time you're a purple belt and a brown belt, like a front roll and that application may not be as important in the hierarchy of learning, if that makes sense, right?
100%. And I do warm-ups. It's just not like the classic jiu-jitsu warm-up that you think of, like, you know, the big circle warm-up and you're running in circles and you're doing this and that. I'll pick a technique. Like, okay, for example, Friday, the first technique of the class and the warm-up was arm drags. We did a round of arm drags from butterfly guard. One person did it for 3 minutes, arm drag, take the person's back, arm drag, take the person's back. And then they do that for 3 minutes, then switch, and then the other person went. Then we did another butterfly drill, right? We did the hook sweep, right? One person did that for a round, switch, then the other person did that for a round. So we did 3 drills like that. So now like we're 15 minutes into the class and we've already done 3 drills to warm up and done probably, you know, at least 10 to 12 reps for each drill, rather than just run in circles and do jumping jacks. And then your heart rate's up, but you haven't really done any jiu-jitsu yet, you know? Yeah. Like I think the warm-ups just need to change. Like that classic jiu-jitsu warm-up, like I've done podcasts on it where I've talked about how much it needs to change. And like, I feel like it's almost becoming my mission in life to get, especially my students and people at the gym, to just get off it. Like, we just got to kill it, guys. We got to really stop. because you can just spend so much better time doing arm bars or arm bar defense. So, you know, like I'm not starting out the classes with like flying arm bar attacks or like, you know, techniques that, you know, like that you're not going to be able to do. Like, I just like my stuff to be simple enough that you can do it. It's makes sense as a warm-up technique. And then we just kind of drill down deeper into that position. Tomorrow morning's class, I'm going to do more butterfly guard, but instead of doing arm drags, I'm just going to do like grab the collar tie, pop up to front headlock, and then take the back. Like that's what we'll do for the warm-up. Each person will drill that for 5 minutes. Then you have a lot of good reps in that specific move and specific position. And then we drill from there. So at this point, I will do like one warm-up technique, and then I'll just go like maybe 2 or 3 at the most techniques on top of that. Any more than that, they're not going to remember it anyways. What's the point, right? Another thing that I've added in more for my own classes is free drilling. And I kind of bounce back and forth. Like maybe I should like let them warm up with this. Maybe I should just like, when should I do it? But I usually do it before I get people to roll. So I'll teach 3 techniques from butterfly, and then I'll say, okay, guys, we're just going to do a drilling round. It can be something that we already did this class, or if you have something totally random that you saw that you want to try out, now's the time. So I'll put the timer on 5 minutes, and I'll just say, just try to pick one thing and just drill it. A lot of people do what we already did. Sometimes you see people get into leg locks and different stuff. So it gives me an idea too of like where people's heads are at and like where I should be going next. Because if everyone's doing leg locks and they're doing it wrong, then it's like, okay, well, next class, I got to do leg locks, right? So I'm just really willing to experiment with class structure and like what I'm doing. Cause you know, we've all had the classic jiu-jitsu warm up. You do however many techniques and then you roll. And like, I think we can just better refine that process and work on it. And yeah, so that's how I run my classes.
Why do you think that traditional warm-up is always just like people just try to beat that into every student? Is that just kind of like it's easy and that way people just don't want to change it? They don't want to evolve? Or is it like, I don't know, what's your opinion on that?
That's part of it. Definitely. I mean, I think it's just kind of human nature that you're going to teach what you learned, and however you learned it, that's what you're going to feel like is the right thing to do. That's what I did for a long time. Like, I'm not saying I never did those classic warm-ups, because I did. You know, I wasted
everybody's done them.
Years of time doing it.
We've all done them, unless you're a purple belt and you walk in right after the
you walk in 20 minutes late. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the classic meme, right? And it's true, because when you're a purple belt, you realize like you don't need to do that to warm up. You can just kind of show up and jump in the first couple techniques, and you know, you're fine. You're fine.
You're being efficient. You're not being lazy. You're being efficient. Jiu-jitsu is about efficiency.
Exactly.
And like, you got to be efficient with your time. So if you're going to go there, like, why are you going to run in a circle for 20 minutes? You're going to take that time and, I don't know, take a nap, eat a sandwich, and then go to class. Like, you know, there's a whole bunch of things you could do instead of running around in a circle.
So yeah, I think doing what your instructor did, if your instructor was the type of person that did that warm up at the start of every single class, and then he asked you to teach, chances are you're probably just going to run that warm up, because for one, everyone's used to it. If you do anything different, people are going to be like, oh, what are we doing? Like, we always do it this way, right? Which is like, that's its own thing in itself, trying to break those habits out of people. And another thing that I think too is that the warm up, the classic jiu-jitsu warm up, it eats up a lot of time. Like, it usually will take 10, 15. I've seen people do 20 or 30-minute warm ups. And I don't know, just the way that I teach, like I put a lot of time and thought into like, what am I going to show? Like, what makes sense? What actually works for me, right? And if you don't take that time to think about your classes, you're just like, okay, well, we'll just do a 30-minute warm up, and then I'll only have to show 2 techniques, right? Like, I think a lot of people, it's just a good way to fill time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Aaron, have you been guilty of teaching that?
Everybody's done it though. Like, you can't even, like, everybody's done it. So I'm not even going to lie and say no, but like, but again, like, I've switched the way I teach my warm-ups now. It's more technique based, right? Like 100%.
I like to do kind of like a combination. Like, let's say if you're teaching like a white belt fundamental class, maybe if you plan on teaching like throws and takedowns. Okay, let's make sure we all know how to break falls so nobody gets a concussion, you know, things like that, like specific things to that. And then it's like, okay, but we're not spending like a half an hour doing break falls. It's like, all right, everybody's going to do 10 break falls. We're going to do, you know, let's make sure we're not going to kill ourselves if we're getting thrown. Now we're actually going to work on what we all came here to do.
But that's kind of the point of like fundamentals classes though, right? Like, if you're going to have that traditional style. I don't know. This is my opinion. Like that's where you would do your traditional type warm up to learn how to do break falls, rolls, all that shrimps, all that stuff. That's your fundamentals more than anything. And then anybody past 2 stripes. Okay, let's move on now.
Yeah, I agree. And especially if there was a time to do it, it would be in a class full of like brand new people that don't really know anything. That would kind of be, to me, the time to like, okay, let's get everyone on the same page. Let's show you how to move your feet. Let's show you how to bridge and show you how to shrimp. But that being said, like I teach a fundamental class 3 times a week, and I just don't do those warm-ups. I feel like it's like my thing now to just not do it. Like I'm just like, no, like I'm just not doing it. Like it's cool for my own time and my own sake to see, because it's like my own class is like my own kind of experiment. So it's like, okay, I'm taking these people from day one and I'm really seeing like, does it matter? Does it make a difference if we get them shrimping and bridging and doing all this stuff every single day? Or will they be better suited just kind of doing technique and just doing arm bars and breaking guard and defending the back, you know? So it's cool. Yeah, I just like experimenting with my classes.
I feel like you're a missionary. You're going to be flying to different countries. Like, no, stop. This is not the
way. I'm open to it. Yeah. I'm going to change the way everybody thinks about the jiu-jitsu warm-up.
This is not the way.
That's right.
Speaking of white belts, this is a common thing I want to ask people coming on is, a couple things. Like number one, like what advice would you give to yourself as like a white belt, or like just, somebody who's starting jiu-jitsu, or somebody who's like, white belt right now listening to this podcast? Like what are some of the mistakes you made, or what's some good advice that you would give, white belts or beginners that want to learn jiu-jitsu, and, how to structure their training and what they should be kind of focusing on at that phase?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, what would I tell myself at white belts, and what would I tell a lot of people, is that you just need more mat time. And I would say, don't act or pretend like you know anything, because you don't know anything. Even now as a black belt, like only now do I realize how little I know. Like it sounds cliche, but it's like, I don't know shit. And I've been training for, 2007. And there's people that can totally smash me, and that's cool. It doesn't like take away from my love of jiu-jitsu. But I think a lot of people in jiu-jitsu, and I see some white belts, like they get to know like a little bit, and they think they know like a lot. Like they'll think like no matter what you show them, they kind of have an idea about it. But I feel like it's much better to just go in with like no expectations. And it's like don't pretend you know anything. Like pretend you don't know anything at all, and just try to take in information from everybody. Like you got to try to take in information from everyone, try to develop a good filter in your mind. It's something that's really important nowadays with YouTube and the amount of content that's online. You got to have a good filter in your mind for techniques that are effective versus techniques that are bullshit. Like we've all seen techniques on YouTube or on a quick Instagram reel that it's like, the person's not resisting and they're just standing there and they do this fancy flipping technique, and you're just like, that's just not going to work, right? And some people, they get caught up on that. It looks cool, and they're like, oh man, like, can you show me this like rolling, spinning, jumping omoplata? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to show it to you because it doesn't work. Like some people just need that type of like reality check. And yeah, I would just say like what I would tell myself is just like get on the mats more. As much as I train, I would just say you got to do it more. Don't act like you know anything. Just try to be humble, and that's how you're going to progress the fastest in jiu-jitsu. Just get on the mat and just roll with everyone, roll with people that are better than you, roll with people that are worse than you, learn how to roll with everyone and how to get something out of every single round. And you're going to progress faster.
And embrace how much you actually suck at jiu-jitsu, which I've done. I'm like, I've been training a while and I'm still, I just tell myself I am still terrible at jiu-jitsu compared to like the highest level people, and some of which I've trained with, and I've told stories on this podcast where you're like, you think you're okay and you kind of like know a few things, and then you train with like people who actually know things and you just get absolutely demolished.
100%. And it keeps you hungry, and it's all self-deprecating humor, and stuff like that. But I mean, like sometimes I'll tell people, like I can beat everybody in this class, but I still suck. So how bad do you guys suck? Because just like you said, I've trained with John Thomas, who's a really well-known instructor now. And I've got to train with Ryan Hall, and I've got to train with Oliver Tazza from DDS. So I've trained with really some of the best people in this sport. And yeah, they've all kicked my ass, but I've got to train with them and I've enjoyed it. And I've learned something from every single one of them. So I've always had that attitude in jiu-jitsu. Even when I was a white belt, I've always been a fairly humble person. And I feel like jiu-jitsu, it just beats the humbleness into you if you don't already have it. So I think that's how you improve, is you just kind of stay humble and stay on the grind and just try to learn from those that are better than you and those that have come before you.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially when you're looking at also building that culture inside your gym too, right? So it's making sure that everybody in the club is just on the same page, right? So how do you kind of maintain that attitude throughout all your students? Is that just something that you just kind of always kind of constantly reminding them of, or sometimes you have to have those conversations with them? How does it kind of work with you guys?
I mean, I guess I'm a lead by example type of person. So I think if the students kind of see how I'm acting and how I carry myself, I feel or I hope that kind of rubs off on them. And I know, especially for some of my more senior students, they definitely have a similar attitude and temperament to me. But you really can't ensure that type of attitude in every single student. I think it's one of the reasons why I feel like it is important to try to be a good role model, and for me to try to put on good classes and try to get kind of the best that I can out of myself and every other person, is that you gotta kind of do stuff like that. But it's tough. You can't get the same attitude at everyone. I'm sure you guys know people that come in and they're a little more hot-headed or really hard on themselves, and sometimes people take a little extra time. There's one guy in my morning class recently who's he's at a good level. He is a white belt, but he's he just thinks he should be really easily beating all the other white belts. And I basically had to have a chat with him the other day. And I was like, listen, man, you're really good, but you just can't have that expectation on yourself that you're going to beat every single white belt. There's going to be white belts that come in and you'll mop the floor with them. And then there's going to be other white belts that come in and maybe they played football for 4 years and they're an athletic freak and they haven't really trained, but you're not going to be able to submit them. And you have to deal with that. That doesn't mean you suck. It means it's showing you have to improve, and you can't have these expectations on yourself, especially that early on at white belts. This is a long road, and you don't want to put so much pressure on yourself that you're not even out of the gate and you're oh man, I should beat this person, or I should beat that person, or this person beats me, I suck. You just really have to enjoy the journey and try to not go with too much expectations. And it's tough nowadays because people put so much emphasis on competition and who's the best and all this stuff. So I think it's really hard for younger people. And like I said, when I was getting started, Facebook was kind of just becoming popular. There was no Instagram. So I think it would be more challenging for me if I was kind of doing it as a blue belt and a purple belt nowadays. And especially you see the success that Gordon Ryan has and other people that are just kind of big mouths and they kind of just shoot off on Instagram. And I've always been just kind of a more quiet, like I said, I'm pretty introverted. I would just rather let the work speak for itself. So I think I would struggle more in just terms of getting noticed. And, I guess I'm still not super noticed, but it's something that I have to work on. But it's just kind of the WWE kind of bleeding into jiu-jitsu, which it works for some people that have that type of personality, and other people like me and other people, there's lots of people in jiu-jitsu that they just want to go have good matches and good roles, and maybe they win the gold, but they don't they're not super braggy about it. So yeah, each attitude in jiu-jitsu kind of comes with its own challenges, I guess.
Yeah, it really does. What are your thoughts on that, actually? It's more just to expand on it, because we talked about Gordon Ryan, who's a lot more kind of WWE. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it works. He's getting a lot more attention, and he's probably going to be making more money off of that because he's generating interest in the sport. But with that said, what are your thoughts on events Who's Number One and Flow Grappling, and they're some of them are promoting this stuff, some of them are not. They've had some really good tournaments recently as well with the Who's Number One championships as well. So what's kind of your thought on kind of the evolution and where things are going, and what are some good things and maybe bad things about that?
Well, I mean, I'll start by saying that when I was a kid, I loved WWE. So no one loved The Rock and Stone Cold and that stuff more than me. So I do love that type of stuff, but it's weird when it gets mixed in with real sports. Like you don't really see people acting like that in like hockey or basketball or baseball. So it's just like
it's kind of weird in those sports too. It's like baseball. I'm gonna kick your ass. I'm gonna hit this home run. What are you gonna do about it?
You don't really see it. So when you do see it in jiu-jitsu or MMA, it's just kind of weird. But in terms of like flow grappling and all the events that are happening, like it's incredible. Like I don't know when you guys would have started jiu-jitsu, but I remember the days when to try to get to watch Worlds, you had to go on 3 different links and open up, this. Yeah, it didn't even make sense how you were going to try to like get on to log on to watch it. You had to go on IBJJF and they had some other like service that you had to try to sign up for. Like it was just ridiculous. But now you got this flow grappling where you can basically go on and watch any of the big name events. A lot of it has commentary now. And I think that's a huge thing that people never ever talked about when I was a lower belt, how none of the matches had commentary on it. And I was like, how come no one ever talks about this? Every other sport that you watch, there's commentary. And there's commentators telling you what's happening. For jiu-jitsu, they just expect you to know what the fuck is happening with these guys rolling around on the ground. Like my mom or my grandparents aren't going to know what's happening if they come and watch this. So I always thought that was kind of weird, but flow grappling is really nailing it just because they have, the most amount of money to put behind it. So it's cool to see these events with a really high level production and you see like the tail of the tape and you see these guys' names on the screens. It's all little things. Like if you showed someone that like watched NFL every week, they're not really going to care. But for jiu-jitsu, it's actually a really big deal because even if you were to go back in 2010, 2011, which isn't that long ago, like, I challenge you to try to find the Worlds event from 2011 or 2010. Like you probably can't find it. You might be able to find it on that. But Flow Grappling does a great job of archiving everything. They promote the big events coming up. I think where it gets a little bit weird is that Flow Grappling obviously has their favorites that they cater to. Because, I feel like there's more than just like the 10 grapplers that they showcase in the middleweight and the lightweight division. Like how many times have those guys been on Who's Number One versus how many grapplers that there are, that's what's a little bit weird about it. And where I'm not like actively trying to be one of these guys on Who's Number One, like to me, I don't really care as much, but I could see how it would be frustrating if you're like a really, really good middleweight black belt, but you don't talk a lot online. So you see all these other guys get put ahead of you on flow and then they just keep getting, chance after chance after chance. So I would like to see flow kind of open it up to have a little bit more variety and mixture of teams and competitors, even in Canada, like I know Dante has been on Who's Number One a bunch of times and he's done amazing. He's an amazing grappler, but it would be cool to see more people from Canada have an opportunity too. Right. So I don't know. It's tough because flow grappling is just going to go with whoever gets them the most amount of views and makes the money, which is Gordon. And I'm sure they have other people as well. But as a competitor, you just like to see more people be given a chance. But you can't really say anything negative about what Flow's done for the sport. Even in the short amount of time they've had like the rights to jiu-jitsu with IBJJF and ADCC, like look how far it's come. Try to watch any video of ADCC pre-flow grappling and fucking good luck trying to get through it.
Right? Yeah. You're gonna go have to find Ricardo Amendolia's VHS collection in his house, and then you'll be able to actually find all that stuff.
I think he has some on beta as well.
Yeah, and it is beta tapes for sure. No, you made a great point, especially with flow grappling, like changing the game as far as like the way they show the sport is amazing, right? They second to none. But as you said, like with the athletes that they choose, 100%, I completely agree with you, where they've kind of have their niche of like who they want to support, who they're going to look after. And it's all guys that are local within that area. So it's like, yeah, it kind of helps for them, especially like San Diego. We look at California, obviously Austin and New York. Those are kind of the 3 central hubs. But then again, anything north of the border, they're not necessarily going anywhere about there unless those guys are coming to the US. And I think that's where they really need to start to expand upon. And hopefully that comes within the next couple of years. But I think that's the biggest thing, where it's like getting more, again, eyes on our competitors, especially in Canada, because there's so many.
Yeah, we all kind of have our different role that we're playing in the sport, right? Like for me, I'm not putting on events. I'm not super actively competing anymore. I see this stuff happen on Flow Grappling, and I'm just like, awesome. More people are getting an opportunity, and that's wicked. For me, my role in the sport now is to be a teacher and try to just get as many people on board with the, like kind of intelligent training approach. And I mean, I'm sure you guys see it now, like students, they just have more resources than we did as they were coming up. Like they're just going to be better. Like I wasn't able to watch how Craig Jones leg locked everyone when I was a blue belt, right? Like you can literally watch that now. You can buy his offense heel hook DVD. You can buy 6 hours of him showing defense on heel hooks, right? So definitely that's a luxury that we definitely didn't have when we were coming up, just the amount of resources and the curriculum you can get from these guys. But I think in my own way, I can give students something that's just as valuable, because there's always something that's lost in translation when you watch a DVD. Like either like if it's me, for example, like maybe I could be like just speaking poorly, or like you just kind of lose something and like how the technique's being performed. Like I think everyone would agree, like you're just going to get more out of it if you're there in person compared to just watching video. You have no chance to ask questions or anything like that. So I think if I can just give people a good framework and like how to learn and just like how to kind of think critically about jiu-jitsu, and like I don't even want my students to like need me. Like I feel like they should be good on their own once they get to a certain level. And now at Halifax BJJ, it's kind of cool because I've had people just run the beginner classes. Like a couple of my purple belts have run the classes. And it's cool getting to see them, because like I've taught them basically up until the point where they're at now. And I'm watching them and I'm like, in some ways, like he's a better teacher than I am, but it's cool. Like, I'm not mad at that. Like, I'm proud that he's a good teacher. And it's like, he wouldn't even be able to do it if it wasn't for me. But it's cool that I'm seeing, like, I feel like I'm building better instructors than myself, which it's just going to keep that kind of like spider web effect going. And like, these people will go on to teach more people, and then hopefully they'll make good instructors, and then they can teach more people. So it's like you just can just, like I said, you just kind of, a small change can just kind of ripple effect into like the greater jiu-jitsu community. So I think Flow does an awesome job putting on events. My role in jiu-jitsu that I see now is just me being a teacher and just trying to get the techniques out there.
Very nice. So is that basically your future, like going forward? Like you're going to focus more on teaching, or are you going to open up another school? Or are you going to make like a world masters, like Master 7 run like I am at some point? Like what are you going to be doing for the future for, your school and yourself?
Yeah, I'll definitely be teaching. I mean, I teach every day and I love it. So I'm definitely going to be just continuing with that. And, I'm just starting out with my own school, but I'll be looking to expand on that in the future, I'm sure. And, just kind of start out small and let things grow naturally is kind of how I like to do it. So yeah. And also in terms of competing, I would also still like to compete. But just at the point I'm at now, like I'm 31. So I still have some good years to compete, but I just feel like I'm only going to compete if my heart's really into it and I really want to do it. Like I'm sure everyone's competed before just because they've been like peer pressured into it, or you just don't really want to do it. And I feel like if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Like if you really feel in your heart of hearts that you want to compete and you want to go out and get after it, it is 100% the best way to get experience. And if you want to become a better jiu-jitsu player, you should compete. Okay. But if you're just like too racked by the nerves, or, you're uncomfortable, then you don't have to do it. And I do a lot of in-house competitions, and I think it makes a difference, and it makes people better, and it just helps people get over the nerves. But yeah, but just going back to, in terms of myself, like I definitely would like to do that Masters Worlds, and compete at that. That would be a lot of fun, but it's just, I see myself as more like, if I'm going to do an IBJJF, it would probably be like one IBJJF event a year, or maybe like 1 or 2 per year. Like, I think for me, competing locally is still cool, because like I said, I like to lead by example. And I feel like if I'm telling my students to go compete and I'm like, yeah, it's the best way to get better, like, I feel like I have to take my own advice and do it as well. So I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah. 2019. I said, I'm just going to compete in every competition this year. As long as I'm healthy, I'm just going to sign up and do it. So I ended up having around 40 matches or something like that year. I did a couple IBJJF tournaments. I did a lot of local ones. And what I learned by the end of that year is that I felt like I had overdone it slightly. And I feel like you just got to pick tournaments that you really care about and that really matter to you, and just try to focus on those. Cause I already have all the reps of competition, just from doing hundreds of matches of blue belt. I've kind of been there, done that. I'm not going to get overwhelmed or surprised by the nerves. So I think for me, there's a couple competitions that happen locally that I'm interested in, and IBJJF Masters, or if there was an IBJJF Open in New York, and maybe there was, I don't know, one of the Meow brothers or something that was in my division, I'd be like, oh, cool, maybe I want to go and do this just to kind of test myself. So I think going forward, I will still be competing, but just not as frequently. Maybe 5-6 times a year, I think would be a lot for me competing, but you never know. If it's something interesting, I'd like to do it. And just kind of just growing my my presence teaching, I guess, kind of both at the gym, and I've been filming a lot more stuff and putting it out online. Also, I think combined with the podcast just gives people a good, just kind of look into how I think about jiu-jitsu and interpret it. And I feel like any good teacher is just going to make the learning process shorter and easier for their students than it was for me. Not to say that I didn't have great teachers, because I did, but I feel like I can just do it a little better because I can just condense the information and just trim the fat and just focus on what really matters. So yeah, going forward, I'm just planning on teaching as much as I can, growing my own school, helping out at Halifax BJJ. They're it's one of the most amazing jiu-jitsu gyms that I've ever been a part of, and I'm really happy to be there and play a small role in that. So yeah, just to kind of spread more and more jiu-jitsu, and occasionally go out and try to win one myself, I guess, is the plan for the future.
Oh, that's awesome. No, we do look forward, obviously, to seeing your kind of growth, obviously with the school, obviously your podcast, having that grow as well. And then again, through the competitions that you do in the future, we definitely wish you best of luck throughout those. But I do want to thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been awesome. We've had a great conversation. Is there anything you'd like to say, whether it's sponsors or shout outs you want to do before we wrap up?
Akiro is a sponsor of mine. Akiro Jiu-Jitsu, they've helped me out and, given me gear and, been a part of contests and stuff that I've done. So I definitely like to give a shout out to Akiro. If you'd like to follow me or just kind of learn more about me or what I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram and on YouTube at Presley BJJ. I'm pretty active on both of those now. YouTube, I'm posting a lot of student match breakdowns where I'll just kind of do a commentary track over an in-house tournament match. I think it's a great way if you're a newer student to get exposed to competition, see the common mistakes, see what works, see what doesn't. And I feel like I've done this for a long time. I have, a pretty good head on my shoulders. I know what I'm doing. So I feel like if you listen to me break down a blue belt match and you're a blue belt yourself, you're going to get something out of it. And for Instagram, it's just a lot more of just kind of what's going on with my classes, kind of quick clips or me doing techniques. So, and if you'd also like to listen to my podcast, that's the Great Canadian BJJ Show. And you can get that on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you can get it. And for the most part for that, I'm interviewing a lot of people in the Maritimes and getting their story, how they got started, what they're into now, how COVID affected them, current issues in the sport. So yeah, if you want to learn more about me, Presley BJJ on Instagram or on YouTube. And thanks to you guys for having me on here. It's cool to actually get to meet you and chat with you a bit. And I always love talking about jiu-jitsu. So whoever's down to do it, I'm willing to do it too.
Awesome. If this whole co-hosting thing doesn't work out, can I come on your podcast instead?
We can talk after off air.
As long as you're okay to do a lot of editing, yeah, you can deal with it.
All right, Aaron, this is the plan. I get 50%. Josh gets 50%. You can get whatever's left over, okay?
That sounds like a plan.
That sounds like a plan.
Josh, it's been awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today, bud.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it. And, have a great night.
All right, awesome. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the mat.